pull it up on my phone also, just so we can see it. And then we'll get started in a minute here. We'll give some people a minute to get in. No. Yeah, I like having it pulled up because when I pull it up on my other one, then I can see who's in there and stuff like that. So people are in. So we're just giving it a couple minutes to see if we can get some more people in, and then we will get moving.
Sounds good.
There we are. Oh, because it's to have us in stereo now. All right. Hello, Lynn. How are you? Lynn has joined us. Jesse, how's it going, Jesse? All right. So why don't we get started here a little bit? So today we're with Sam, and Sam is going to talk about nutrition for recovery. So recovery, and Sam, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's going to apply both to having an injury and coming back from an injury, but also even just recovery from a hard workout, a hard game. Kids who play in tournaments, things like that. You're going to be able to use some of these tips, some of this advice for recovering from that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
Cool. So I wanted to get started by talking a little bit about you and kind of what you do and your credentials and all that good stuff. I know you're a registered dietitian nutritionist, I think is how it was explained. So can you kind of describe what that is and what you did to get that and all that good stuff?
So yeah, registered dietitian, I had to take a national boards examination. And had to have a bachelor's degree. They are changing it soon so that you do have to have a master's. I don't know what year that is, but they're pretty much combining all the programs now. But yeah, I'm also certified in the state of New York to practice as well.
And you were an athletic, so we're gonna toot your horn here. You were an athletic trainer also, right?
Yep.
And you were a competitive power lifter.
Yep.
At one point, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've worked with collegiate level athletes. Mm-hmm. What kind of clients do you work with? Do you work with all that good stuff?
So when I was doing athletic training, I worked with Division II athletics and some high school sports. When I went to do my nutrition degree, I had the opportunity of working with Notre Dame, mostly the football program, but all of the sports there as well. So I was out in Indiana for a little while for part of my internship. I've worked a few camps with some athletes as an athletic trainer, but also kind of threw out some nutrition advice there as well. Let's see, I think that covers it. I see people at Capital District Sport and Fitness, depending on kind of what their needs are. So high school athletes, college athletes, adult fitness clients. A little bit of.
So if you guys, if anyone who's watching remembers, we had Mike and Dan on a couple weeks ago talking about we were talking about squatting, and so that's where Sam's also out of there with her nutrition stuff. So that's cool. And I had a question in it, and it now went away. But and what do you? So you work in the gym there with the athletes, the young athletes there, the high school and college athletes there. But then you also do something else. Right?
Yeah.
So like you're all over the place.
Yeah. So I help out at the gym every so often when they need me for the nutrition clients. But my full-time job is with the state of New York. And I do a lot of clinical nutrition mostly. So research-based, some hospital stuff. So I do have
you're working right now.
Knowledge of nutrition and all lifespans and everything. So
that's awesome. And I'm sure some of that applies to the athletes and vice versa and all that. So, all right. So we were going to talk today about nutrition for recovery. And I know enough to kind of get me in trouble in terms of, I know there are foods that promote inflammation. I know there aren't foods that promote inflammation. I know you need protein. I know that you need all these different things. So I do think it's pretty interesting how you can tailor your nutrition to help you recover. So, so I think this is going to be really, really cool talk to go through. So where we wanted to start was kind of showing you guys what happens when you have a tissue that's in an injury and going through this recovery. So there are these 3 phases where you get inflammation when you have that initial injury or that initial recovery, and it's typically when you get hurt. So we already got a question here, Sam. I'll pop that one up in a second.
Yeah.
And so you get that initial inflammation, and you have here, it says you want that initial inflammation that's starting your healing process, but sometimes that can become chronic. It can last too long. Then you move into stage 2, proliferations, where the tissues start to rebuild. You start to recover, and then the last one is remodeling, where those tissues start to take form of what you want. That's pretty basic kind of overview of how tissues recover. So that's where I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to actually pop this question up for you, Sam. So it's in the back of your mind, and this is going to be one an ideal ratio between protein, carbs, and fat for runners. So I think that's something we can get. You can answer it whenever you want, if you want to do it now or you want to wait a little bit.
I can touch on it, but I'll touch on it, I think, a little bit more later. It ultimately depends on the distance, kind of what your goals are. There's a lot of different factors when it comes to that. Okay,
so my guess there would be it's for cross country runners. So five, what are they? 5Ks, I think. Yeah. 3 miles, something like that. So, so we'll touch on that one a little bit later. But now that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm going to let Sam go ahead and take over based on that outline we posted up earlier. That's kind of the steps we're going to go through. So go ahead, take it away.
So I'm going to cover a little bit of everything. Hopefully everyone can see that. Yep. Okay. So your nutrition can be paired with each phase of the recovery process or the remodeling, whatever you want to call it, as you go through injury recovery. So the biggest focus, though, overall is pretty much general, like a healthy diet. Obviously, you want your protein, you want adequate fruits, vegetables, and healthy grains or whole grains, depending on what your needs are. So I'm going to kind of go through each of these points here in a little bit more detail. And Pat, feel free to chime in if there's questions or something you feel like you want me to cover that maybe I'm skipping.
Yeah, I'll definitely jump in and ask questions as we're going. And the same thing with everyone, with whoever, if you're listening, just ask questions as we're going, and we'll pause and answer them as we go.
Okay. So the biggest thing that I'm going to mostly I'll talk about the food aspect, but one of the things that's often skipped over is when you're in injury recovery, a lot of, especially with athletes, I've noticed this, is they tend to, because they're out of sport, and they will restrict their intake because they feel like they're not getting as much activity, when actually your body needs, there's a balance between having adequate calories and protein. It's a little bit higher than if you were a sedentary person, just because you are in the injury recovery phase. So you don't want to be too restrictive. It's more about choosing the right foods during that time than restricting calories, if that makes sense. We'll talk about protein and different supplements, anti-inflammatory foods, pro-inflammatory foods, and then hydration and sleep.
I think the supplement part is going to be an interesting part.
A lot of questions on that one.
Yeah.
So we'll see. All right. So we talked about stage 1. So you can't completely eliminate inflammation. It's part of the process. You need that to repair your whatever you've injured. But there are ways to kind of not let that get out of control. So managing that through your diet and through whatever that's giving you or whoever, just to kind of manage your inflammation levels. The general population in general is inflamed to some degree. We hear a lot about that in the news now. A lot of disease states are caused by inflammation. So like heart disease is an inflammatory disease. So it's critical in all aspects of life.
All right. I also think that people should should realize, and I mentioned it before, but even if you do a hard workout, you are breaking your tissue down. So you're going to have some kind of a recovery response. So it's not just having a major injury or anything like that. It still applies. This information still applies even if you don't have an injury, but you're working out regularly.
Yes, exactly. So this definitely applies just post-workout or just throughout the day in general, to kind of manage inflammation and make sure you're giving your body the proper nutrients to repair and recover from that workout or from that injury or just from life, because life can be hard. All right, so anti-inflammatory foods. So actually, I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. We're going to talk about the pro-inflammatory foods, which we can all kind of guess is going to be your highly processed foods. So fast food, chips, those snack stuff, foods with high trans fat, so cookies and things like that. And these are kind of a staple in the regular American diet. So, and I'm not saying that these things are an occasional, in moderation, cheeseburger, great, have it. But if you're having these things every day consistently, I imagine you're not feeling that great. So having overall good nutrition is better. So anti-inflammatory foods. So you'll notice that there's a lot of fats on this category at the top with the green. So, and those are mostly what we call omega-3 fats. So those aid in they're anti-inflammatory. So you have your olive oil, avocados, flaxseed, ground flax, and your fish. So, and nuts and seeds as well. So those are all high in omega-3. So we hear a lot about fish oils and how great they are, but you can get a lot of that stuff just from your diet. You don't necessarily, if you don't eat fish or something, then you might want to take that supplement, but you can get them just from preparing those foods and trying new things if you don't like them. And then also herbs and spices are great for flavor, but also because they have a lot of properties in them, antioxidants, especially in turmeric, or if you want to call it curcumin. It has anti-inflammatory properties in it. People will also take turmeric supplements, but you can also add it to foods. Just don't add too much because you'll definitely notice it, but small amounts. You don't need too much. This says 7 teaspoons a day of powder, which is quite a bit.
A lot of that.
So I think even a small amount of turmeric is fine. They probably tested or did a research study on that to figure out those amounts. But I guess if you really wanted to, you could take the supplement. Just be mindful of, if you're on any medications, of drug-nutrient interactions. Same with garlic. Garlic also has that. And then pineapple has bromelain in it, which is also anti-inflammatory and aids in recovery and injury repair. And then it talks about tea and stuff. So you hear about tea in the news all the time, and it has plenty of antioxidants and things in it as well.
So when you talk about the anti-inflammatory foods and then the those are mostly like you said your omega-3 fatty foods, right? Fatty acids.
So it's those healthy fats that you hear about.
Yeah. So the processed foods and the vegetable oils and the burgers and stuff, those are just, when you're looking at those, are those your polysaturated fats, your monosaturated fats, your trans fats? How are those broken down?
So depending on what it is, so if you're eating a lot of fatty red meats, that's going to be high in saturated fats. So most things have a balance of all of the different types. So mono, poly, saturated, unsaturated fats in them, but it's more about the ratio. So when I'm talking about omega-3s, like olive oil and those things, they have a higher ratio of omega-3 fatty acids. They're still going to have those other fats in them, but it's about the ratio. So when you're looking at foods or you're looking at a label, you're not usually going to find something that's just only omega-3s. It's more about the ratio of those
unless
things.
it's a supplement.
Yep. But with processed foods, There's trans fats, which are pretty much created through like a chemical process. So margarine has trans fats in it. Anything that's fried and just highly processed tends to have high saturated fats, but will also have low amounts of trans fats as well.
Okay.
All right, let's see. Does anyone have any?
So, and this would be more of like, okay, in that first stage of injury, if you, let's say you just got injured,
Mhm.
you want to focus on trying to have a little bit more of these in your diet, the fish, the avocado, the olive oil, the nuts and seeds and things like that. So, you know, for me, like looking at this, my takeaway would be like, okay, right after my injury and in those first few weeks, I want to focus on making sure, you know, you say the burgers and stuff every once in a while are good, but maybe not during this period of time.
So you want to, so this isn't like a meal plan. These are things that you should be trying to incorporate in your diet. So like, obviously, if you're making a meal during that first phase, it's great to have a piece of salmon, but you're also going to have hopefully a vegetable of some sort, which aren't listed on here, but they have plenty of antioxidants and everything as well. And then using a little olive oil if you're sauteing it.
So it's not necessarily saying every night you have to have a piece of salmon and a piece of avocado and you know, a cup of almonds. Mix those things in with your meals if you aren't getting them to begin with. You should probably include them within these stages.
Yep, or snacking on a handful of nuts between meals is good to have. You don't have to make sure you have all of these things all at once. It's just finding ways to incorporate them into that phase, especially if you're not having them on a regular basis. Finding ways to bring those into your diet, whether that's a smoothie with pineapple.
I love pineapple. That's
adding so one of the recipes I have is a tropical smoothie, and it has pineapple, a little bit of turmeric and ginger in it, and I think like vanilla protein powder, and it tastes kind of like I don't want to call it. It's a pina colada, I guess, in a way, without the coconut.
This is a recipe you have?
Yeah.
Well, where can we find this recipe?
I can have Mike link it, or I'll ask him to put it on the poster. I can send them over.
Yeah. After this is done, I'll link. I actually, if you're watching, I'll link what Sam is going through now. This her outline here. I'll link that, and then we can link to that recipe as well.
So Lynn asked a question. I don't know if so nutrient interaction, when I'm specifically talking about that, that's if you're on a specific medication. So if a doctor prescribed you something, you would just want to look up and make sure that if you're taking a supplement, that does not interact. And then there are some other foods that have interactions as well. So if you're eating a lot of leafy greens and you're on a warfarin or Coumadin, I'm getting really in detail. You just need to be mindful of those things. So you just want to check if you're on medications that none of the things that you're eating, or if you're taking a supplement, or interacting with those.
Yeah, and I would kind of piggyback that with, if you are on medications and you're planning on taking supplements, or you take supplements, you should probably be talking to your physician about that, or they should be aware of that's what you're doing.
Yep.
So cool. All right.
All right.
Thank you for the question, Lynn.
So we did that. All right. So I talked about this briefly. So energy intake, what I mean by energy intake is calories in versus calories out. So during that time, when you're recovering from specifically an injury, your metabolism actually increases because your body's working harder because you've just hurt yourself. So now it's trying to repair itself. So that's why when I talked about not being too restrictive, obviously if you're a marathon runner and now you can't run marathons, your energy requirements are going to drop, but they're not going to drop to like a 1,200 calorie diet. Like, you shouldn't be that restrictive. You still need to get an adequate amount in to help yourself repair. All right.
I think that's actually a really important point. A lot of people when they stop training, it's like, well, I can't eat as much because I'm not training, and or whether I'm injured, whether I'm not, whatever it is. I think that's something that's super important for people to understand is like your body is still working really hard to try and recover. So you still need the energy to do that.
Yep. So while we're kind of on that part, and I'll talk about this also with the other question as well about runners. So eating adequate protein, balancing your dietary fat, which we talked about, eating the rainbow, and eating enough carbs. So I talked a decent amount about fat already. So this pretty much kind of gives you a ratio here. About 1/3 of fat can be from saturated. So if you're a meat eater, you're going to be getting saturated fats from your meat and fish and eggs as well. But you're also getting the other fats as well, coupled with that. And then a third, polyunsaturated. So those things all come from any type of fatty food. So you have your healthy ones, which we talked about, your avocado, your olive oil, your fatty fish. Seeing if I'm missing something here, nuts and seeds. Those are all going to provide you with some mostly monounsaturated, some poly, and a little bit of saturated fats. If you are a vegetarian or vegan, you can get adequate protein from beans and legumes. You can use supplements and soy products. If you eat dairy, you can use that as well. Pea protein is a good substitute if you don't do dairy and you are kind of avoiding soy too. Some people, that's kind of their choice if they have any interactions with soy or allergies, I should say. Eating the rainbow, so making sure you're getting a variety of your fruits and vegetables and adequate carbs. So when we talked about runners, even any athlete that's getting a decent amount of, it also depends on your goals, but carbs are always important. I think lately protein is taking the focus for a lot of people, and that's great, but also you don't want to eat too much protein because then you're missing out on nutrients from other foods. So it really is a balance. So one of the things I like to tell people is that when you're sitting down for a meal, breakfast is a little bit harder, but right now, since everyone's home, you could probably do this. Half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. About a quarter should be your carbs. So whether that you can put fruit in that category if you're if you're trying to lose weight. But when I'm talking about carbs in the quarter of a plate, I'm talking about your starchy vegetables, so your potatoes, sweet potatoes, or your grains. So whether that's pasta, brown rice, quinoa, well, all those other ones, you have couscous, there's a bajillion. That's a quarter of your plate, and your protein's a quarter of your plate. So when you are making a meal, your focus should really be on vegetables and fruit, depending on kind of what meal you're eating. But I always like to tell people to really focus on getting enough vegetables at meals, because people tend to load up their plate. Like you think about when you go to a restaurant and you sit down, you're getting half a plate of steak, like a tiny little bit of string beans.
Or more.
Yeah. So the ideal plate is half of a plate of fruits and vegetables. For the ratio of protein, carbs, and fat, the generic ratio for, I would say a runner would probably be 40% carbs. And then if I'm doing this math right, 30-30 of each of the other two, maybe a little bit more carbs depending on your body type. But it's kind of comes down to your goals, your body type, how much exercise you're doing. So I can't give a specific ratio without knowing you, but a general guideline is 40-30-30, or it could be 50-30-20. So 20 of fat, depending on what you're
generally 40-30-30, but if you're going to go in a direction, it's probably to increase the carbs and from an energy perspective.
For a runner, especially the longer the distance, I would say. So if you're a marathon runner, you would definitely want to kind of have more carbs that are going to be not necessarily fast acting. So there's different times. So there's nutrient timing as well for runners or any athlete. So they say like 3 to 4 hours before, you should have a pretty well balanced meal that has complex carbohydrates in it. So things that are chock full of fiber and take longer to digest. And then during activity, when you need that burst of quick acting energy, you're going to take those simple carbohydrates, whether that's, I mean, people use those Gatorade little squeezy pouches. Pretty much just sugar. You could use applesauce. You could use different types of things. Fruit is considered a simple sugar as well, even though it has fiber, but it just digests quicker.
See, that's interesting to me too, because would that be similar if you had an athlete who was performing over the course of a day? Like if you were at a soccer tournament or you were at a basketball tournament, or what if you were at a powerlifting meet where you're competing really quick and then you're not competing for a while and then you're competing really quick and then not for a while. Is that a similar?
So yeah, I definitely think of, I played soccer most of my life. So I think of when we would play tournaments, it was like, you really didn't have enough time between games to have. So like ideally, if you're going to a tournament, you had a pretty nice breakfast, I would say.
Okay.
So a well-balanced breakfast, and then throughout, you're either having fruit, you could have pretzels in between.
So you're having something fast-acting throughout.
Something fast-acting throughout that's also not going to weigh down, because when you're running around, you're not going to want a cheeseburger in your stomach. Right. You're going to want something that's a little lighter, but also is still going to be filling enough.
That's cool. I think that is so like obviously you took it to the next level. It's not just macros. It is you also have to take into account the type of macro, the type of carbohydrate, mm-hmm. especially for long distance and endurance type sports. So I think
even if you're playing anything that's really over an hour. So you think of like soccer games and stuff, or depending on how long everything happens, even any type of sport, lacrosse, football can take forever. Any of those that also applies. So 4 hours before a game, if you're a high school athlete, I don't know how many high school athletes we have on here. But kids, if you have kids too, this applies.
Is that why you always get orange slices at halftime?
Yeah, that's an orange slice, but it should probably be paired with like some peanut butter or a handful of nuts, so that it's acting quicker, but it's also not just like you get that blood sugar spike and then you're kind of.
That's funny. I had a mom when I was growing up playing soccer who she always gave us celery and peanut butter between games, and no one knew why. She just did it, but it sounds like it was a good thing for us.
Yeah, the celery doesn't quite make sense, but peanut butter does. It's kind of just water, so it's not providing with the carbohydrates. Peanut butter provides you with some carbohydrates as well, but not as much as if you were having like an apple and peanut butter or something like that. Nice. All right. So I think I covered most things on here. All right. Yeah, I did. So this slide here, I don't know if I can make it bigger.
Yeah, try and just make your.
No, that's not.
Yeah, right. There you go.
That was right?
Yeah, you can zoom in and do that.
So I'll just slide it over, and if I need, I'll talk about the first few. So this is, I'm going to go into more depth on the later slides, but this is talking about things that are important in wound healing. And I follow these in the hospital setting as well. This is also relevant. Not necessarily the glucosamine, chondroitin, and the amino acids. I mean, the amino acids are also part of it, but this all applies. So obviously we know what products provide you with calcium. So you have your milk, your cheese, your yogurt, but also leafy greens. Collard greens specifically provide you with some calcium, and then they fortify fruit juices with calcium as well. But then you also want to be mindful of the sugar, because a lot of those things are just packed with sugar. So coupled with calcium, though, is vitamin D. And they have to be paired together because they depend on each other for absorption in your body. So when we live, or since we live, I don't know where everyone lives, but since we live in the northern hemisphere, we don't get enough vitamin D, and that will ultimately impact how much calcium you're able to absorb. So that's why they kind of go. That's why they go hand in hand. You need them to be paired together.
So I think that's super important, because most people, you just hear about, oh, you need calcium for bone health. But you don't hear about, well, you need vitamin D also.
So if you ever go to the doctor and you get your vitamin D tested, and they tell you you're low, they should retest you to make sure, because if you have too much vitamin D, it can do the opposite effect. So you see, it's important in bone healing, but it's a balance. So if you're getting too much vitamin D, it can actually cause breakdown of your bones. So that's why if you do go to the doctor and you start a vitamin D supplement, and especially because they give you a pretty high dosage to get you back up, and then they might give you a maintenance amount. I wouldn't know those specific amounts, because usually they have a protocol. I know I'm waiting for someone to ask that question.
Yeah, so
depending on what your blood level is, they'll give you a dose that's pretty high for a couple month period of time, and then they'll give you a maintenance dose, or they'll retest you. And that they follow a specific protocol based on the ranges of your blood levels.
So how does it work in, like, and then maybe vitamin D is not in it, but the vitamins that people take, like the 1-a-days and all that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm. So if you just flip over the backside, you'll see how much is providing. But also when you're taking a multivitamin, some of the things, or some of the other nutrients in there, or the vitamins, because you're taking them all at once, you're not actually getting that amount, if that makes sense, because your body has to be able to absorb it.
Right.
So it will say how much is providing on the back. And I'm not sure if vitamin D is the one that they give you a really, really high dose of. It's usually vitamin C that you'll see really high, but you can take a bunch of vitamin C, you'll pee it out. So it doesn't matter. Vitamin D is we call it a fat soluble vitamin. So it sticks to your fat cells. So that's why if you have too much, it's not good. But like vitamin C, you can have a bunch of it.
Much.
When they're sick, they just take it all in.
Okay.
Vitamin K you get from leafy greens, broccoli, soy foods, prunes, and pumpkins. I never say no one really takes a vitamin K supplement. That you mostly just get from leafy greens, that you can get from your diet. And then magnesium as well, depending on kind of what your needs are, but they come from pumpkin seeds, almonds. I don't need to read all of these. Mm-hmm. But also you think about recovery in general. I don't know if people have seen there's like ointments that you rub on your body for if you have muscle soreness, they have magnesium in them.
So your skin will absorb that.
Your skin actually absorbs a decent amount of magnesium. Also, if you take Epsom salt baths, which a lot of people will do that after they work out or if they're pretty sore, that has magnesium in it. Yep. So that creates that. I don't know if anyone's ever had this, but when you put magnesium oil, or if you put a lot of Epsom salt, you kind of get this tingly sensation on your skin. That means like you don't have enough magnesium. So it can be a little tingly.
I will frequently recommend to people to do Epsom salt baths too. So that's good. So I think all of those are important too. You know, if you've broken a bone, or if you're a long distance runner, or if you're someone who's had a history of stress fractures, things like that, and it's not just the calcium, it's all these things combined. And so if you're not getting leafy greens in your diet, you know, you might be missing a key component to keep your bones healthy and healing and stuff like that.
Yep. So especially with all of these, my main focus is the food sources. When supplementing, I'm always going to suggest you go through your doctor, just because you should be able to get a decent amount through your diet. But if you're continually having issues, especially if you get a lot of stress fractures and things, they might want to test your calcium and vitamin D levels to see if that's a contributor. But my main focus is the food sources of these things. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah.
I'm not a supplement expert. I don't know the specific dosing of everything. So when talking about supplements, you should likely go through your provider. All right, so the other ones here. So glucosamine is something that occurs in the, how do I want to put this? The like cartilagey parts of fish. So soft shell crab, you eat the whole crab, which the first time I experienced that was a little weird.
Yeah, sounds like the gross part.
Yeah. But it's so you don't really, I had it in a sandwich. So you notice it's crunchy, but like it's edible. It's not like in your throat as you're swallowing it. And small bony fish, so sardines and anchovies, obviously you're not picking out those little teeny tiny bones that are in there when you're eating them. Chondroitin and as well. So that's in the connective tissue. It's also in our body as in our joints and things like that as well. I'm not quite sure what, I guess gristle on the bone is that part when you get down to the bottom of the chicken wing. That's kind of like,
yes, like that connective tissue.
You can pull it off with your teeth, but yeah.
Yep.
And then arginine and glutamine are essential amino acids that we need in our body, and they come from meat and fish, and then some other vegetables and dairy products. I don't know if you just saw anyone leave the door there. And then you have zinc, vitamin A, and vitamin C. So I'll let you guys kind of read through that on your own, so I'm not boring you on that. But zinc's another important one that people don't realize that they're not getting enough of. So I will read those off. So oysters provide a decent amount of zinc. Beef, they fortify things with zinc. Pork, beans, dark meat, chicken, yogurt, and then cashews and chickpeas.
And the wound healing part, you might look at it and think like, oh, I don't have a wound, but if you had a surgery, you have a wound. If you're coming out of any kind of reconstructive surgery, rotator cuff, labrum, ACL, anytime you get cut open with a scalpel and they stitch you back up, that is a wound. So these things will also help with scar, scar healing and all that kind of stuff too. So when you look at it, it's not just because it says wound doesn't mean it's like, oh, no, I don't have a wound. You have, if you're someone who's coming out of surgery, these things will apply as well.
Yeah, but also when you're thinking about a wound, even though it's not like you have a cut on your arm or something, like if you sprain your ankle, that's essentially a wound. It's repairing itself.
Yeah.
So they also apply. All right, let's see. Let me scroll down here. So I briefly talk about supplements. It gives you recommendations. This is from Precision Nutrition. I think I can minus this so it fits. Okay, there we go. So always ask your doctor if there's a reason why you shouldn't be taking these. Vitamin C's pretty safe, but copper and zinc and A, if you needed to supplement with them, you should talk to your provider. The other supplements on the bottom, there's some research behind it, but not a lot. So they'll talk about it. I've never experienced proteolytic enzymes. I'd actually have to look that up. But glutamine, arginine, and HMB they're used actually in the hospital quite a bit with wound patients. So those make sense. And you can get supplements for that, but just be mindful. And then if you're an athlete, a collegiate athlete in sport, and you need to make sure they're certified for sport. So it says that you can use the NSF website to look that up. But if you're in a collegiate sport, you should probably check with your athletic trainer, and they'll let you know. All right. So I already talked about these, so I'm not going to go over it too much. It just pretty much gives you the sciencey part behind glucosamine and chondroitin. So don't necessarily need to.
Yeah, like I said, I'll link to this. So for those of you that want to read through it, we'll definitely give you access to it.
Yep, and the same with calcium and vitamin D. It talks about how they need to be kind of paired together. So vitamin D is critical. It says it in the middle of the page there for calcium absorption and for homeostasis and bone turnover. And then it talks about,
And I think you say under there, so supplementing with doses of vitamin D should be determined by the individual's blood level and monitored by sport dietitian.
yep.
800 IUs per day has been shown to help reduce fractures in female athletes. So that might be something then that a female athlete who is running a lot or playing a lot or jumping a lot, whether they're a basketball player or whatever, runner, cross-country runner, is probably a good idea for them to know, right?
Yeah. So these things, so when you're in, so this is from the Team USA Nutrition. So when they say work with your sport dietitian, they have access to that. Most people don't have access to that. So you're going to want to ask your provider, especially if you have an orthopedist or in your primary care, you can check with them. When you are working with a sport dietitian, if you are fortunate to have that experience, they are usually working closely with a physician or a physician assistant. So there's two people there monitoring that whole process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think that's super important because most people don't know what that is, and you might know you need it, so you supplement with it, but you might actually be doing what you, like you said before, you might actually be doing more harm than good if you're just supplementing every day with vitamin D and just making your levels go through the roof.
So this is why you should always go to your yearly annual physical and ask to get your blood tested.
There you go.
All right. So then I gave some ideas for meals and snacks to aid in recovery. So this one, if you like orange juice, people really love orange juice, so it's on here. I'm not a huge juice drinker, but that's a breakfast idea for you. Same with cereal.
The last couple combinations seem interesting.
Sardines. I love sardines. Honestly, I'll just eat them out of the can, which people probably think is super weird. I think it's just because I know how good they are for you. So kind of just
string cheese and sliced kiwi.
That is an interesting combo, but I imagine you're not eating them together. But they're using the kiwi because it has the same, a little less than the pineapple, but it's providing you with that same nutrient. So that's kind of why it's paired in there.
And then cottage cheese with salsa and chips would be.
Have you ever? Okay, I used to do this. If you mix cottage cheese and salsa together, it's pretty good. And then you can scoop it into, it's kind of a weird queso. People probably think I'm crazy.
I'm going to have to try this. So cottage cheese, mix it with salsa and eat it with chips.
I would do tortilla chips, obviously. If I didn't usually eat them with chips. I would just kind of mix them together. Maybe fruit, or not fruit, maybe like celery or something makes a little more sense. But yeah.
That's interesting, but definitely good to know to have actual, like foods that people can refer to and stuff.
Oh, so actually I'm looking at, so where you see beef stew, so bone broth is essentially, I mean, you could probably think of your grandparents. When bone broth is like trendy, I'm just going to call it trendy because it is.
It is.
When your grandparents made broth, they literally threw all the bones and the carcass of whatever it was into a pot and just boiled it for
a while.
Forever. So that's where you're getting that chondroitin and glucosamine and stuff because it's being taken out of the bone marrow and the cartilage and all of that of the bones.
Gristle.
So that's why it's providing, yes, that's why it's giving you all the beneficial nutrients.
Okay.
All right. So sleep. No?
You can, go for it.
All right. I just didn't know if we got a question.
I'll do it. No.
Okay. So sleep obviously is very important. Sleep is where our body recovers and it's where we kind of create all of our hormones and balance them out and especially if you're, I think of bodybuilders in this scenario, if you're a weight gain. So I get a lot of kids at the gym that they're going to college, they're 140 pounds and their baseball coach wants them to get to 160. And they're just that scrawny kid. I don't know how to put it.
That's what they are.
So and a lot of them don't get teenagers don't get adequate sleep. Sometimes they'll get too much than they need, but you also think they're probably messing with their circadian rhythm. So they're probably going to bed at like 2 in the morning and then sleeping till 2 in the afternoon. It's kind of messing everything up anyways, but you want to get a good 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So whenever I'm talking to a kid that's trying to gain weight, I'm always talking to them about sleep because that's when your recovery hormones kick in, and that's when you're going to build muscle. So same when it comes to injury, you need adequate sleep to repair your muscles, bones, ligaments. It's all important because the more stressed you are or the less sleep you're getting, the more inflammation that's going to occur in your body.
And as a PT, I usually tell people, I'll get people that come in with shoulder injuries, say, I can't sleep on my shoulder and, it hurts, or can't sleep on my hip, it hurts. And my first thing is to be able to get them to sleep comfortably, because if I can get them to sleep comfortably and get into deep sleep, they're going to recover way faster.
Exactly.
The process is going to go way better and way faster. So I think, it applies across the board. If you can get good, uninterrupted deep sleep, which, I know is hard for a lot of people to do. But if you can get that, it's going to help you recover. And like Sam says, it's going to balance your hormones. It's going to, everything is just going to run smoother if you can do that.
So as with anything, there's a thing at too much sleep as well. So same when we were talking about fat or supplements, too much can be doing harm. So look at your sleep, especially if you aren't recovering or you feel like things aren't going your way. Check your sleep. If you feel like you're tossing and turning at night, or sleep can indicate overtraining. So if you're training too hard, it's also going to be messing with your hormones and impairing your sleep. So I don't know if that made sense, but.
So as we go into the last topic here, I'll just ask the question right off the bat because I know people will want to know it. How much water should I drink a day?
So there's different recommendations everywhere. And even the dietetics community can't come up with a specific number. I usually tell people an ounce per pound is a good starting place. But that can change depending on how much sweat. Like in the summertime, if you think of preseason and you got football players that are losing 7 pounds in practice, you need more water, but you also need more electrolytes as well. So, but as a good rule of thumb for like day to day is probably to try to aim for 1 ounce per pound.
All right, so I need to drink more water. I think the last thing I heard was half your weight in ounces was the last thing I heard, but that was probably like a year or two.
I mean, that if you are someone that really doesn't drink enough water, that's a good place to start. But I say if you can get 1 ounce per pound, that's pretty good.
How dehydrated do you think people are?
I don't know. I feel like I'm not around. Well, if we talked about Dan Jones, he's probably pretty dehydrated.
In general, I feel like everybody's dehydrated. I feel like nobody drinks enough water.
Yeah. So even just aiming, I mean, if you want to start with the half your body weight in ounces, that's a good one. I feel like for the smaller people, though, that seems like very little.
Yeah. It's
So
like 50 ounces or something like that.
The old guidance of like 8 8-ounce glasses a day.
Yeah.
So that's 64, right?
Right. That's like nothing.
Yeah, that's not much. Especially if you're active, you should be getting more fluids.
And if you don't like water, there are other ways to make it taste different.
Yep. So adding fruits and stuff to the water, drinking seltzer water. I'm not a big seltzer water fan. I feel like I don't feel like I'm getting hydrated from seltzer water.
And I feel like it should taste different.
It does. What do you mean it doesn't?
Like growing up, I drank soda. So if it was carbonated, it's soda. So when I go to drink like seltzer water, I'm like, nah, it doesn't really do it.
Yeah, I think I like Pellegrino. I think because it's bubblier than like regular seltzer.
Mhm.
But yeah, I know some people like live by LaCroix or whatever seltzer they're drinking.
Yeah, and the adding the citrus fruit for taste, you can do that. And then I've also seen people freeze it, so they'll slice it and they'll freeze it, and then they'll drop it in their water to keep their water cold
Mhm.
and have a little bit of taste for it too.
And it doesn't have to be citrus fruit. Like people do cucumbers and other cucumber mint.
How about berries?
I feel like you don't get a lot of flavor from berries. You'd have to like mash them
To
a little bit. And then you'd have like things floating in your water, which that doesn't sound appealing to me.
no.
But yeah, berries are hard because I feel like they don't give you a lot of flavor. You
Right.
have to crush them.
And then, and point number 2 that you have on here, know the size of your water bottle. It just makes things a lot easier, especially if you're an athlete, especially if you're working out regularly. It's just a good idea to have something that like, oh, I drank 4 of these today. So like, oh, on a typical day, I need to drink 3. If I work out harder, I should probably have 4. It's just a good way to keep yourself on track. So not a bad idea. That one right there is a hydro flask, which
that's a 64 ouncer.
is a big guy.
Yeah.
I have a 32-ounce Nalgene, so
so I would drink 3 of those in a day.
So that's 180 something.
That's more than I would need.
That's a lot.
I mean, it's just you also have to follow your thirst cues as well.
Right.
If you're thirsty, drink more. But also, usually the sign of thirst just means you're already dehydrated. So.
Right. That's how I take it. If I am thirsty and I need water, I was probably dehydrated before that. Yeah. So.
All right. I think that was the last. Yep.
Yeah, that was it. Awesome. Thank you. I think the big takeaways for me are, pair your nutrition with where you are in your recovery, and then I really liked having some foods there that people can choose from, and then knowing those supplements, especially if you're someone who is pounding pavement or jumping a lot in your sport. Knowing those bone healthy supplements and stuff that you need to get from your food, I think sounds like it's really important. So,
and I mean, in general, following those tips, even without injury, is going.
Yeah, I would agree.
Diet, so.
Cool. Yeah. So, Sam, you were with CDSF. I think your bio's up there. How can people get in touch with you if they have a question for you or anything like that?
So if you go through, we got a question, but if you go through the Capital District Sport and Fitness website, you can put in a contact through there.
Nice.
Get a hold of me.
And just
email
direct it to Sam.
Yeah. And then we got a question.
What do you think about sports drinks?
Yep. So sports drinks have a time and a place. So you shouldn't be drinking them all day, every day, because there's lots of electrolytes and things in there that you might not need. But if you had a long training session, having a sports drink after to replenish your electrolytes is kind of when those are needed. But I know a lot of people will just drink them as their beverage of choice. Some of them tend to have a lot of sugar in them as well.
Yeah,
Propel's the only one that provides you, well, not the only one. Gatorade makes a 0-calorie version, but Propel also is 0 calories and provides you with electrolytes. But you also don't need that much replenishment. Like one of those, the purpose of those when they were invented by Gatorade was for post-workout or preseason for football players. For right after they came off of a 3-hour, 4-hour session and they've just sweated their butts off.
Drink one of those
electrolytes to rebalance that, and then water.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Don't a lot of them have a ton of sugar in them too? So you want to be careful with how much of those you're drinking, especially like throughout the day.
Yep.
I mean, Gatorade's now marketed for you to try and drink it throughout the day, but it's not necessarily when you need it.
Yeah.
So they can go to the Capital District Sport and Fitness website and go through the contact page and ask for you. We will also, so if you're listening to this on the replay or just listening to it now, we'll post links for the outline that Sam was using. And Sam can post the recipe for her, what is it, a pineapple shake?
There's a bunch on there. They're just recovery shakes.
Recovery shakes. I like it.
And most of the recipes make 2. So when you're looking at it, it does say that there's a little disclaimer that it makes 2.
Disclaimer that it makes 2.
Yeah. So if you're following it specifically, you're going to have a lot of smoothie.
Hey, that's all right. You share it with somebody. Everyone, right? We're all stuck inside for a little while longer, hopefully.
You can throw it in the freezer.
There you go. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Right.
I think a lot of that stuff is very important for not only recovery from injury, but just a balanced and healthy nutrition as well. So we appreciate you sharing your knowledge, and then we'll put those posts up, and then Sam will post the recipes up. And if you do have any questions, feel free to post in the comments below once this gets posted up to Facebook for the replay. If you do have any more questions, just let us know. You are very welcome, Agnes and Lynn. Thank you for joining us. All right. We'll see you guys next time.
See ya.
Bye.